Thank so much of you here and virtually watching for coming out throughout the entire month, being part of these activities. You know, I shared yesterday in another event that for me, the reflection of Black history continues to be about the significance of knowing our history. And we have a dynamic program to close out our events. It's going to be led by Assistant Professor Stacey Watson, who will take it from there and share some incredible observations, and certainly our panel around some DI discussions, and then the homage and tribute to the Divine Nine. With that, please welcome Assistant Professor of History, Stacey Watson.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Let me try again. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
It's Black History Month. We're celebrating. So, of course, we are in the process of celebrating. It's our last day. We're wrapping up Black History Month, but that does not mean that we stop celebrating all of the achievements of all of us and what we're doing. And we still want to make sure that we are acknowledging what Black people have done over the course of this time. I also want to just say thank you for coming out this evening, as well as for our panelists who are here, who I cannot wait to introduce momentarily. Dr. Reese had mentioned to us the importance of Black history and why this is a big celebration. So for those of you who do not know the history of Black History Month, I want to first give you a little bit of background about Black history. And we cannot do that without first acknowledging Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson, when he was attending University of Chicago, he was getting his master's and was realizing that the actual image of African Americans being depicted in media was stereotypical. And that was something that he was not in support of. And as opposed to continuing this image of African Americans being depicted in these stereotypical roles, he said it's time for us to actually celebrate the achievements. Let's not continue to highlight the minstrel shows, if you will. So as a result of this, in 1916, he made it a point to create the Journal of Negro History, which is where we celebrate and acknowledge, and we have a written record of what Black people have done that are considered achievements. As we continue on, we also see the development of the Association and Study of African American Life. And with this organization, this is going to be the foundation of what we would call Black History Month. So a lot of people are aware, of course, that Black History Month is in the month of February, and it's the shortest month. And a lot of people have issue with this without knowing really where this comes from. So with the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History in 1915, Dr. Woodson said, let's go forward with this. So with the Journal of Negro History, he is going to then arrange and come together and collaborate to help establish Negro History Week during 1926. So in 1926, we see the beginning of Negro History Week, and that's going to include 2 birthdays of Frederick Douglass, and also it's going to include Abraham Lincoln. When we think about Frederick Douglass, we also think about his achievements. February 12th, his birthday is during this week, and then February 14th with Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is also going to receive most credit, of which African Americans are going to celebrate Abraham Lincoln because he freed the slaves. And I say that loosely because if we think about the 13th Amendment, we always know that there's a loophole there that does not free us if we commit a crime. So I want to make sure we're aware of that. So when we think about Abraham Lincoln and during his time period, this is going to be the most celebrated achievement of Abraham Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation. And of course, the Emancipation Proclamation, we have the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment. And at this point, everyone is considered to be free in the United States. So of course, during this time, this is going to be much celebrated. And then we expand to make this something that is acknowledged yearly. But before we get out of the week, we have to start thinking about how do we continue to celebrate Black Americans. So over the course of 1926, and as we continue to move forward, Carter G. Woodson said we need to go ahead and change this and acknowledge the history by creating the Association for the Study of Life of African American History. So what we're going to see is that a new organization will be developed that is going to highlight pretty much all of the achievements. We're going to use this time to not neglect anybody out of history, so to speak. We're going to acknowledge those achievements. And with the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, we're going to move towards this month. And with this month, it will become an actual federal holiday in 1976, which is going to be initiated by our President Gerald Ford. So when we think about the importance of February and what it means to us overall, of course, we want to acknowledge Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. But what are we doing since this has become our actual month of which we celebrate since 1976? And that's why today it's important that we do have the representatives of our community to help enlighten us on what we've done since 1976 and what we would like to do going forward when we talk about Black History Month and its importance. So I would like to go ahead and briefly introduce our panelists and why they are here, and then we're going to get into Black History Month, its importance, its future, its past, its promise, and hopefully what we're doing right now in the present to make sure that we continue to be acknowledged. So first, to my left, I have Ms. Shonda Burrus. She is the Chief Equity Officer of Paducah Public Schools. Now, Ms. Burrus is definitely a key and a gem to Paducah, as she is part of Paducah's home. And she has made her way back to Paducah. She is a proud 1993 graduate of Paducah Tillman High School, returning to the same school to serve as the Assistant Principal, Dean of Students for 2 years before taking the position of Paducah Public Schools' first Chief Equity Officer. The great thing about Ms. Burrus is that she prides herself in encouraging young ladies to think and dream beyond the boundaries, challenges, and circumstances that serve as stumbling blocks in the paths of life. Through mentoring and coaching, her desire is to empower every student to pursue their passions, believe in their dreams, and simply keep pushing despite the tribulations that come with everyday living. Ms. Burrus is also the recipient of a myriad of awards, and the most, I don't want to say the most important, but I would definitely want to just highlight that she is a proud recipient of the Impact Award given to her by the Alumni Association at, is it Azusa? Azusa Pacific University. Also, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People Service Award, the Movers and Shakers Award from the Black Chamber of Commerce, 2016 Region 10 Educator of the Year Award, and there is a host, and we know because she sits in Black Excellence, she will continue to be awarded. So I also want to just say thank you so much for being here with us this evening. Next, we have Mr. Derrick Parrott, who is a native of Mayfield, Kentucky. He's currently serving his second year as the school home community liaison at Mayfield Independent School District. Prior to accepting this position, Derrick worked in the social service field in various capacities, with the most recent one being a supervisor position with PACS. For the past 10 years, Derrick has also coached for the Mayfield School District for both football and basketball teams. While being an active member of Second Christian Church, he is also serving his third term as one of the city council members for the Mayfield community. Derrick is married to Ashley Parrott, and he has 2 children, Derrick and Ari Parrott. I just wanted to make sure, pronouncing people's names is important. So I want to make sure. And then he's also in collaboration with the coordinating of the Cultural Diversity Program at both the middle and high school in Mayfield with Emily Shelton and Niaz Claydon High School at Mayfield High School. So I wanted to say thank you for being here with us today, Derrick, as well.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And then we have Ms. Stacy Thomas, who has been the Community Outreach and Diversity Coordinator for McCracken County Public Schools for 2 years this February. Before accepting this opportunity in the district, she served as the Family Resource and Youth Services Center Director for McCracken County High School for 7.5 years, where she coordinated the efforts to eliminate any non-academic barriers for over 2,000 students. She was previously the Business Education and Leadership Director for the Paducah Area Chamber of Commerce. For almost 10 years, where she directed the prestigious Leadership Paducah and Youth Lead programs. Stacy has trained employees and students from various businesses and organizations in Western Kentucky on leadership, diversity, effective communication, and group development. She holds a master's degree in organizational communication from Murray State University and loves to see people grow, learn, and develop both personally and professionally. So once again, I would like to say thank you for all of those who are in attendance and our panelists for being here this evening. So what we're going to do is go ahead and take our time in developing some real hard-hitting answers that expose us to the truth of what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like here in our community. And we attach that to Black History Month, because when we think about Black History Month, back then we didn't call it diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we have to think about why that even exists today, why that is an organization, program, or thought. So in this room, we have a lot of collected thoughts and wisdom to help us enlighten us about what exactly is diversity, equity, and inclusion and why it is needed. So I would like to first start off today with Ms. Shonda Burrus and tell us briefly, share with us your journey in doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work.
Well, it actually started, yes, I am homegrown, born and raised in Paducah, Kentucky, but I left right after high school and called California my home for 25 years. So a lot of this work started in California through myself as a counselor and an administrator in our school districts in California. So this wasn't something that was new coming to Kentucky. What was new about doing this work in Kentucky is the fact that this is Kentucky. And the realities of some of the barriers that we would have to face in terms of doing the work and to be able to do the work intentionally. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't new with the position, having the ability to bring some of that, the information and what was working already in California to Kentucky and to look at it and bridge it so that our students are successful. So making sure that I had a nucleus of student achievement at the forefront and looking at that is making it a more smoother transition. But there's still always work to be done.
Absolutely. And how about your journey, Derrick?
My journey, well, I've been coaching for the past 10 years, and the superintendent and I, we serve on several boards, and he had reached out to me saying that he would have a position available for school home community liaison, and which I looked into it because I was already coaching the school system, and I feel like coaching, I always took into play equity when coaching, because I know it's important that you can't treat everybody equal. That's not equity. So I figured when that position came open, not only could I reach my students that I'm working with, I could have a better reach on them, not where I wouldn't only be working with them on the football field and basketball court, but in the classroom as well, where it's most important. So not only that, but I wanted to make sure that I could be able to reach all students, not only athletes, to make sure they're getting the supports and resources that's needed to help them to be successful.
Now, Derrick, can you enlighten us on exactly what your position is?
Okay. What it is a school home community liaison, where it is where I work with a lot of the at-risk students. What I mean by at risk, we have students that have academic issues, attendance, or behavior issues. And also I work with different interventions and programs. We look for areas where we have opportunity gaps, and I work with different administration throughout the different school buildings to try to bridge those gaps.
Okay. All right. And Stacy?
So I think my journey, kind of like Shonda's, when I graduated from high school, I went off to a Bible college in Dallas, Texas, and it was called Christ for the Nations. And so nations, it's the key word there. And I had a lot of experiences that I never experienced before, as far as with different cultures and different backgrounds and things of that nature. And so, and then you come back to Kentucky and everything's white and black. And so for the most part, we have always had a journey of the equity and inclusion part. It just never had a title. And so for the most part with my journey, being in family resource, I had to figure out a way, even though that I was hired for poor kids and people and kids that didn't have a lot of money, how could I eliminate barriers for them? The monies that I had at the school were for all kids, and so I had to figure out how to create equity for all kids. I knew I could relate to the poor kids, but what about the middle-class white kids? And what about the Hispanic kids? And so always trying to figure out how I could create equity and inclusion where I was. And so this transition was just, to me, even though it's a title change, it's still eliminating barriers for us. For the most part, I've always navigated white spaces. And I've always been in a place where you're trying to bring inclusion into a space. And so, which landed me to the community outreach and diversity position at McCracken County Public Schools.
Awesome. Well, that is a lot. When we talk about your journey, getting to where you are and how beneficial you are to Paducah. So we're definitely glad to have you. And I say we because I am a resident of Paducah, if you don't know. I'm from Michigan. So the great thing is I get to say that I am a Paducahian right now at this point. So when we talk about the journey, and I think that's important, when we speak about the journey of how we get to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're also speaking about history. So there's a history that comes with this journey. And we're talking about 1926 to 1976, when it goes from Black History Week to Black History Month. There's a journey there. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about that journey, how important is that journey to you in your position?
So I think, when we look at the history and we look at the 50s, diversity, equity, and inclusion has been around. It was affirmative action, and, the names just change throughout the years. But really, the only reason that we have it is because we needed a place to include Black people. Let's just be honest. And so the names have changed throughout the years to create a place not just for African Americans, but for all people. And so as we look over the journey and how the history has changed and how the way that we approach not just Black history, but diversity, equity, and inclusion, it has shifted and changed over the years to making sure that we're not leaving anybody out. And so I think, when I first got the job, my assistant superintendent and I went across our district and we did some sensitivity trainings because I work in a predominantly white district. My district is 17% student minority and less than 1% staff minority, if that tells you anything. And so one of the things that we had to do was we had to let them know this is what we're going to be doing. This is what our district is going to be a part of. It's not going to be an initiative. It's going to be efforts that we do because we want to create a space. We want to create an inclusive space for where every kid and every staff matters in our district. And so one of the things that we talked about is that everybody knows who Martin Luther King is. Everybody can quote him. And everybody knows who Rosa Parks is. But what about the other people that were alongside some of these civil rights activists that didn't look like me or Shonda or Derrick, that were fighting for our rights? And so one of the things that he and I had a conversation about was there are some things that he can say as a white man that Stacy can't say. And so I need you to be in the forefront of these efforts so that we can create spaces within our district where people know that this is not just, we're not just people that were Black that were hired to do these efforts. If we want to create a place that's diverse, that's equitable, and that's inclusive, everybody has to get on board. Because when Stacy's out of the office, equity should still be happening.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes. Derrick, same question for you. When we talk about the journey, thinking about Black History Month and how it relates to you in your position.
Okay. Well, when I think about Black history, it's American history. It's important to know where we started, where we're at, and that helps us navigate where we're going, where we won't make the same mistakes that was made in the past, and which we have a lot of accomplishments, but we still face some of the same challenges from then to now, as far as in the communities, in our school system. So it's still the same challenges, same obstacles, you know. So as Stacy was saying, it's important that everyone's on board. You know, as far as my position, I came in as a school home community liaison. Then about maybe a week after on the job, I think Shonda might have gave me a call, and then about a week later, I'm talking to Stacy on the phone or whatnot. So, you know, and once we start discussing the work or whatnot, we all connected instantly. And this work we're doing is more so heart work.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's important to have everybody on board, but just being realistic, everyone's not going to be on board.
Correct.
You know, so we have equity meetings, and at one point, everyone was coming together. It'd be a team from our elementary, middle, and high. All three site bases would come together for a meeting, but we didn't have much conversation. I was reading the room, I could tell by body language, some people wasn't on board, but no one would speak, you know? So now we have meetings at each site base, and, you know, we have some uncomfortable conversations. And I continue to drill equity and diversity and inclusion and belonging or whatnot, and try to encourage people to speak. Like, let us know what you see, what you feel. Give us some input, where we need improvements, you know, to help people better understand diversity, equity, inclusion. So that's kind of where we at. And as I mentioned, it's important that we get together in the small groups at each site base to let everybody know we need champions in each building, you know, because I'm not the only person that's representing diversity, equity, inclusion. In order for us to have an impact on our school district, we need champions in each building.
Absolutely.
Now, Shonda, I want to come back to you. As the Chief Equity Officer, I have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
First, can you tell us exactly what your role is as the Chief Equity Officer? And I'll pause to give you time for that answer.
Well, great question. And if you look up the job description on Paducah Public Schools website, my job description is 4 pages long. And to know me is to know that I work, but the barrier is that I'm doing the work, all 4 pages of the work. And what that is inclusive of is that the realities, and we all know from Paducah Public School System, part of the reasons that my job was created. And so what I have the opportunity to do is disaggregate data, looking at some of the things that was rooted out of our audit, and to be able to go to each and every school in our cabinet. I have the opportunity to sit on the cabinet and have those uncomfortable conversations, and I'm comfortable with those uncomfortable conversations. And so a lot of times what that looks like is that we look at the curriculum, we look at hiring practices, we are looking at classroom practices. I'm also the SBDM coordinator, which is the school-based decision-making coordinator. All of the SBDMs in terms of recruitment and retention, again, 4 pages. And so it surpasses the nucleus of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in terms of what the specific role is. And I lovingly joke, but I'm not joking. So a lot of times, because it is a 4-page job description, sometimes I just have to blatantly ask, are you asking because you need backup? Or are you asking because there's a need for systemic change? And so I don't do it with a bullhorn. I do it by being comfortable with those uncomfortable conversations to be able to see the change that is happening, specifically with our gifted and talented, having the opportunity to have the conversations and look at the data and see what our programs are, to see what are we doing to implement recruitment and retention. We have established our District Equity Advisory Council, which right now is about 54 certified and classified staff members who do this work with me. So this is definitely not the Shonda Show. These are teachers and staff members, from administrators to teachers, to secretaries, to personnel, to cabinet, who voluntarily do this work with me once a month from 3:30 to 5. And so we look at some of the initiatives. What we do is we look at the initiatives, we disaggregate the data, look at our achievement gaps and see what our next steps are to be able to tackle that. And so because there's so much work to do, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. We specifically have taken 5 initiatives. And so for those of you who are familiar with our school report card and looking at the achievement gap, the reality is when you are doing things that are great, and there are great things that are happening in Paducah Public Schools, but the reality is that there's always work with any school system. So you either have to say amen or say ouch. And the reality is that when you have to say ouch, then look at what it is and those things that has not served our students and our community well, and to come up with plans, not a check mark in a box where you can just call it a policy and be done with it, but to hold all of us accountable for what those are. And so it has been, it is definitely a journey. So going back to your question about the week becoming a month, I'm 2 years in. The work is happening, the work is rampant, but it is not for the weak or the faint at heart.
We believe it. We believe it. And we thank you. We thank you. Now, the second question that I want to pose is really for each one of you. And I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm hoping that you can answer. Stacy, can you, for our audience, define diversity in DEI?
Just diversity?
Yes.
Diversity to me is differences, and that can be a whole slew of race, age, religion, sexual orientation, so many different things or demographics that encompass diversity.
Thank you. Equity.
Equity is providing different resources and different tools that each individual need in order to reach a certain outcome.
Inclusion.
Well, I'm going to go backwards and go forward to answer
Okay.
that question, because for the K-12 system, we actually have DEIB. So that's the equity and the inclusion part. And so the inclusion piece, in a simple definition, is that I invite everybody to the party. But to add that B on it, I can invite you to the party and you still feel like you don't belong. And so when we talk about the inclusion, we can check that box and say, well, everybody was welcome. Everybody was invited. Doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is welcome. So that B for K-12 system is making sure that if we say that every child by name and need, that we're recognizing that, just not to make sure that every child is included, but the families feel like they belong when they do come to the party.
Nice. So now we think we have a better definition of DEI. We have a better understanding of the journey, right? And we have a better understanding of the roles of which these panelists put their heart and soul into throughout everyday life. The part that I want to mention is, now how do we translate DEI into education? So we have a better definition, we understand their role, but why is DEI important in education? And why is it so important in society? And why is it a thing? Because now people are making DEI A/B trending as opposed to it being, important and substantial. Can we, and anyone can jump in.
Yeah, sure. You're right. It becomes the taboo word, and depending on the audiences and who's speaking depends on the outcome of it. For us in education, the reality is that we present this work, but then the stakeholders who don't really see this as a necessity still have those water cooler conversations. We can have the meeting, but there's always the meeting after the meeting. So that's where the water cooler conversations happen. That's where and for me particularly, I welcome those fun suckers and naysayers to the meeting, because you come in with an ideology and an expectation of what it is. But the reminder for this work in education is student achievement, nothing more, nothing less. What happens and where the barriers come in is where we come in with our egos and our presupposed ideologies about what the work should or shouldn't be based on our own inferences. But if we're going to, in essence, if we're going to speak about it, we have to be about it. And so you have to have the wherewithal to be able to do the work and to make sure that the work is sustainable. And that doesn't come easy. It doesn't come easy at all, but it's worth the journey when we are reminded that we do this for student achievement when we're talking education. And I know some of the conversation would be, well, what about the staff? What about the community? What about the teachers? And it's all inclusive, but we chose education. We as the adults, we chose education. So that nucleus is student achievement. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, the words are new, but the work is not new. We have just, it becomes the new taboo, but when we talk about special education and disabilities, when I say the work isn't new, when we disaggregate assessments and data, what do we disaggregate it by? Race, gender, socioeconomic status, and what is all of that? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We just slapped another label on it, but the work is still the same.
Anybody else want to jump in?
Well, just as Shonda had mentioned, when you thinking about DIB and you're thinking about as far as education piece, we have this opportunity gap, and a lot of that comes from, okay, are students not having a certain student achievement because the equity piece is not there, or they're not getting the resources, the supports? Do they feel included? Do they feel they're in an environment conducive to learning, to promote learning, or the faculty and staff that's teaching them, do they have the expectation, are they building the relationships, doing the things that's necessary to help students to have success?
And that's definitely important inside the classroom to make sure that our students feel included. When we talked about pronouncing names, making sure that we pronounce everyone's name correctly, and if we don't know, we ask.
Absolutely.
Because that is important, especially when it comes to being included. Now, Derrick, you had mentioned earlier about being on board and being in a room with people who are present, but they're not on board. Can you, all three of you, are you able to share what that looks like as far as how do you navigate those people who are not on board and you're still trying to make sure that DEIAB is allowing to, is basically being received? So how do you navigate those who do not want to be on board, and what challenges do you actually face when you are up against this opposition?
So I always, in my mind, I know that this is inchworm work. I know, like Shonda said, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so it takes time. And perceptions and biases haven't just been built up overnight. They've been built up over years and years, compounded upon years and years of just perceptions and biases and things that they think about different types of people that may or may not be true in their mind. And so that is one of the things that, of course, we talk about sometimes. Sometimes you get tired having to reiterate or having to explain why you do this as a Black person, or, so many different things why you get tired. But the work is very important because of the perceptions that the community may have about this work. And in an effort to I believe that this is hard work and it is mirror work. And I don't have the ability to change somebody's heart about how they feel about my skin, about my age, about where I grew up. I don't have that. But I can put in your hand the tools. I can give you the data that shows that these are the things that speak to maybe your biases or your perceptions about a certain group of people. And if they don't see it that way, then that's fine. What we really have to do is we really have to get the people that are ready to roll on board. And there's going to be some people that get left behind, and that's okay. Because that's with anything that you do. And so I think it's very important to just to try to find, like we call them equity champions, to try to find those people, because we don't need to be doing the work alone. When I took the position, it was very imperative that they know that this work is not just going to be hard, it's going to be mentally hard. Because when I come into my space, I may not ever, on a daily basis, see an adult that looks like me. So think about my kids in my district who navigate their spaces. They may not ever see an adult that looks like them. I told you it was less than 1%. And so how do we look at, disaggregate those numbers and say, we can look at our numbers, and I can tell you that our middle school African-American kids are very low in their proficiency as opposed to white kids. And so we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, why is that? And we can't just take the one black person that does the equity to look at the numbers. We've got to get people, if we don't have them in our district, we got to get people in our community, and we got to say, what's going on? What are we doing wrong? And I think it's very important that we do that. We know, I know, the people in my district office, central office knows that everybody's not going to be on board, and that is quite okay. We just got to find the folks that are on board, and we can. I'm a Bible believer, and I know that if God can cut 10,000 down to 600 for Gideon, just give me the 6. Give me the 600, and I can work with that. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like that we are going to have to do some of that, having those uncomfortable conversations, and we have those. Do we get tired of having those? Absolutely. Yes, we talk about it. We have the meeting after the meeting.
Yes, we do.
But we can't get stuck there, because the people that have their perceptions don't want this work. We got to keep going. We got to keep going. And the one thing about my generation is we're not like the Martin Luther King or the John Lewises. We get tired, we stop. You know what I'm saying? But we've got to be able to create and raise a generation behind us that's going to stick with it.
Absolutely.
And we got to model that.
Absolutely.
Even when it does get hard.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well said. Now, so we mentioned the challenges, of course, and trying to figure out ways to navigate those who do not want to get on board, who appear to be on board, who provide the perception of being on board and pretend to be. However, I do want to also acknowledge that there's opportunities that allow us to move forward. Tell us about the opportunities and positive results of your DEI work. Shonda, Derrick?
Sure. So I mentioned earlier that we have our District Equity Advisory Council, and it's about 52 right now staff members, classified and certified. On an average, again, we meet once a month after a long school day, 3:30 to 5. And on an average, because, there are sports, some are doing ESS, some are doing tutoring, on an average, we have about 30 who still show up. And of that 30, probably 20, and this is me, subjective data, about 23 are my white colleagues. Because of demographically where we are and how we sit, this isn't a black or white thing, this is a student thing. So you have to recognize our staff and our colleagues who recognize and see and want to have the visibility of change, who see that the work is necessary. And so Stacy mentioned something earlier, just to kind of piggyback on those who are not on board with this conversation. I think it's in order for me, I set the tone in the atmosphere. You have a right to feel how you feel. You don't have to look like me, think like me, believe like me in any regard, but you do have the right to respect the humanity of the student or the staff that is sitting right in front of you. And in order to do that, you have to look at your own biases. Black, white, green, or Martian. That's the reality. So within that district, the diversity, equity, the District Equity Advisory Council, for the first couple of months, we didn't talk data. We didn't talk numbers. We didn't even talk about the audit, because I needed for them to understand who I was and who I wasn't. Forget what you heard. You have it right. You have me right here in front of you. So ask the question so that I can tell you specifically what this work is about, and I need you on board. And for those of you who are in the room just to see what we're doing, I need you here too, so you can go back and run tell that, so that you understand the work that we are doing and that we are doing it continuously. So we don't shy away from the uncomfortable conversations. We just go to each other and cry on each other's shoulders. But it's nothing changes until something changes. And so you need the people. It's easy to do the work when you have the champions in there with you. And what I mean by the champion is that we have educators who say, because I often asked, why are you here? Why do you show up? And in their own honesty, we have gotten answers is because I have been privileged. My children are privileged. That is not the world of diversity that I want to see, and I need to learn. And I value that honest answer. We can work with that. I can move with you. That way, when you want to know about my hair and why it's changed, I can answer you instead of saying, don't touch it, I'm not a pet. So it's about the cultural relevance. It is about being able to create an atmosphere in the room where it's not us and them, but it's letting the me die for we. So that takes a lot of work instead of coming to the table with a demonstrative or combative attitude. We're not going to get anywhere. So even with those who are not, who doesn't see the ideologies of this work, it's still necessary, but you have to create the tone in the room. Don't invite me to have a seat at the table, but then minimize my voice at the table. So you have to create that environment where we are all welcome. Again, don't believe what I believe. Don't believe what these students believe. Disagree with their lifestyles. But what you do owe and what we do owe each other is the opportunity not to disrespect, demoralize, or demean because we think different. So that was creating a culture and a climate. We had to do that in order to actually talk about the microaggressions and the biases and the prejudices before we could actually even go into our data for our work. And so, again, it's riding this marathon, not for a sprint.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, as we continue to move forward, we have a couple more questions. I just ask that those in the audience, please make sure that your phones are on mute or vibrate so that they are not a distraction. In addition to this, I want to bring it back and inform you or have you inform us in your work that you are doing. Tell us about the purpose of your multicultural clubs at your schools, or what work you may be doing outside of your schools that extend with DEI.
Okay, I'll take that one. Well, as far as our multicultural work, it's important to have different cultures, and because once we have different multicultural programs or whatnot, clubs, it just brings acknowledgement and appreciation to the different cultures. Helps us to appreciate other cultures. At the same time, you can learn from other cultures as well.
Absolutely.
The different beliefs, different norms, and each can learn from each other. Mm-hmm. Different cultures can learn from each other, respect and appreciate each other. And it's just important because when you have everyone working together, different cultures for one common goal, you learn and you thrive from that.
So we, when I first got the job, probably like a couple months, we have a grant writer, so don't come calling me to write a grant because I didn't do this one. But she wrote a grant for $25,000 and we got 50. And we went to each one of our middle schools and got some 8th graders of different demographics, race, age, religion, sexual orientation, all of that. And we took this group of middle school kids and then a handful of high school kids, and we meet quarterly. And Shonda calls hers her student equity group. mine is similar to that, but we've done a lot more training just for the grant's sake and for what the purposes of the grant were. But these kids come together around the table and they talk. They talk about their differences. They talk about, what they like, what they don't like. They talk about their heritage, their families. They talk about issues that they see in schools. In our schools, we ask them to reimagine schools. And you wouldn't believe some of the answers that they gave just within our own school district alone. And so this group has been really dear to my heart because they are a group that I feel like that could help create that type of space within our high school. Because they're young and they're fresh. They have a smaller group of upperclassmen that are helping to guide them. We have Mr. Damian Sweeney, he's the Kentucky Department of Ed DEIB director, who came down for the first few times and did some training and things with us. And so we have that group. And I was inspired by Shonda to start an African American Leadership Club myself. I don't know if you guys know Mr. David Dobbins. He is with Rhythm Middle School, and then we had a counselor who's white, Holly Miller, who has been phenomenal. She's one of those allies that you just want on your team. And we have tried to create some of those spaces for African American kids to have a space to go to. And we've invited community members, entrepreneurs, owners, doctors into our school. So that our kids can see adults that look like me. And not only that, we have tried to create those spaces for within the school day to bring in different people within our school, within our community to come to our school. Because I may have a kid that walks through the halls of McCracken High School from first through sixth period and never see a person of color their whole time. And so we've started those. And really, what we want to do is, we never even had these conversations. And so for us, I tell my boss all the time, it's a miracle, because we've never really had these conversations. And for us to be able to start these conversations, not just with the adults, but with some of our kids, and honestly listen to the kids and take their feedback. Y'all know how you really want to, you asked your teenager what they really think, but you really don't care because you're going to make the decision for them anyway because they live in your house. We're trying not to do that. We're trying to listen and trying to create a space where they know that they do have a seat at the table and that we are listening. Absolutely. And how can we use your voice to help change the culture of our district or just the culture in your class? Let's start there. That may work. And then once we get that culture changed, let's go to another class and go to another class. We have to move slow. And because of the district that I work in, we have to be very strategic in how we do it because there are perceptions about DEIB, but we don't want the community to speak for us. We want to be able to tell our stories ourselves.
Absolutely. So, I don't know where most of you were last Friday night, but I'm hoping that the majority of you were at Paducah Tillman High School Auditorium for the Black History theme program that was titled Unity in the Community. So in addition to the 4-page job description, I am the advisor for the African American Leadership Club. I am the advisor for our Student Equity Advisory Council, as well as the founder of a mentoring program, all serving Paducah Public School students. So for our African American Leadership Club, in its inception 3 years ago when I returned home, again, we were doing this work already in California, so the transition was easy. They have the opportunity, and this is after school. This is an after-school, self-funded after-school program, and we have had as many as 62 students on the roster. But when you're competing with the arts and athletics and academics, it varies. The students have the autonomy to come up with the discussion topics for African American Leadership Club. There are a couple of rules. You have to know the creed. Every meeting we start out with Lift Every Voice and Sing. They do have to know what we call our creed, which if you were there Friday night, it is, we are the descendants of kings and queens. We come from royalty, destined for greatness and leadership. It is a legacy of our heritage that allows us to take pride in our culture. We strive for excellence, integrity, and purpose. We are AALC, me. And the reason why we start with that mantra, because what we're trying to explain and to feed into our kids, understand who you are before somebody else defines who you are. And so this is, now that they, and then they have a little rap too. They told me I couldn't rap. I had to show them that I could, I had to put it on out there. They said I was a little old for that, but I had to, channel my 1993 days. But anyway, so, and you talk about the resiliency of our students, of our kids. Again, they have to present because we're teaching them public speaking, commitment, honoring your commitment, and our children are scared to do this. So one of the things that I tell them is do it afraid. And these are some of the topics that our children, your children, came up with and presented on their own. Mental health in the African American community, demasculation of men, what does that look like? Sexual assault, understanding who you are, the difference between code switching, whitewashed, and stereotypes. And for African American Leadership Club, for us, is 8th grade through 12th grade. This is the resiliency of our students. The minority experience in advanced and AP courses at Paducah Tillman High School. I give them the platform and I tell them that they have the freedom to use their voice and the autonomy. Training them up is what we're doing. And you give your children, if we give our kids an expectation, they'll rise up to it. They'll rise up to it. They know that I love them, but they know I'm not playing either. And so what you saw on Friday night was a representation of that. Now, you talk about the DEIB piece and a continuum. So out of my position, we created the Student Equity Advisory Council. So, and what they have done, and it's an application process, no GPA or anything like that, but you do have to submit an application. You do have to have a character reference. We took them on a retreat for 3 days for training. And when I say training, it was about leadership and life skills, social emotional prowesses. I took their phones for 3 days and they survived. Their parents knew going into it. So it was not a negotiation. Again, it was the expectation. So they didn't have their phones the whole time. I chose who they roomed with. I chose all of the activities that were encompassed of DEIB. So because we had students at Tillman, and I have the diversity within the group is that I have West End children to lower socioeconomic children, all residing at Paducah Tillman High School, and some had never even spoken to each other. So we took them away, and so that if you want to do this work, you're going to have to learn that this work is uncomfortable, but it's going to require some things of you. And out of the work, they have student forums. So they meet 50 kids, 50 students have had the opportunity to come out of class and to talk about this work. And so our students have been trained to lead this work in pockets. In addition to the student forums, they have had their teacher staff forum, and they are facilitating this work. Our students are facilitating and having the conversations and the breakout sessions. And so they had one with our teachers and our staff regarding student-teacher relationships from the student perspective. They were able to disaggregate data from a partner that we have for EOS, which is Equal Opportunity Schools. And so the teachers and the students had an opportunity to talk about this work. And again, our staff showed up voluntarily 5 o'clock at night. At 5 o'clock. So it's working. It works if you work it, if you focus on those who are willing to do the work instead of spending the time arguing and debating with people who serve no purpose or value. We don't have time for that. There's too much work to do. So, and what's coming up, shameless plug, is that our Student Equity Advisory Council is going to have a community forum. So they have 2 forums left for the year, a parent forum and then also a community forum. Again, these are our student leaders who are resilient, who are more comfortable with these uncomfortable conversations than we are as adults. But it took a lot of training, and it took a lot of creating an environment for them to be empathetic and compassionate and understanding for each other. Because I asked some of our West End students, part of the training, I put a lot of posters on the wall, and you had to go through and put either a green or a red mark on it. And some of the questions was, have you ever been to animal court? Have you ever experienced racism? Do you have any friends outside of your own race? So because in order to do the work, you have to understand the work. And our kids have just been the bomb. So Friday night, after that amazing Black History presentation, we got on the road at 9:30 at night, and I drove the Student Equity Advisory Council to Louisville, and they presented to the Kentucky School Board Association about the work that they're doing. And then also KDE came to Paducah for 3 days with a camera crew, and I was mic'd the whole time. I fell off the table, but they can use that as a blooper. But we were mic'd the whole time because they wanted to see what we were doing so that they can create a systemic version of this, because we are the only school. It ain't bragging if you can back it up. We are the only school right now in the state of Kentucky with a Student Equity Advisory Council that is doing the work on this magnitude, where they are presenting to teachers, staff, and the community. So that is something for us to stick our chest out with, because this hasn't happened. Our students are guiding this work about diversity, equity, inclusion, racism, lower socioeconomic statuses, having equity walks with our staff. And so the work works if you work it.
And we have to definitely thank you for being their leader and helping promote this autonomy with these students. And we can't wait to have them here at West Kentucky.
Absolutely.
WKCTC. We are welcoming them here when they come. So absolutely, we want to thank you. As I stated, we want to wrap up our panel discussion. But as we wrap up, there's a couple of things that I want to reiterate. When we talk about Black History Month and the importance of Black History Month, we already talked about the journey. We already talked about the roles. We talked about being in a room full of people and they're not on board. But I want to ask this question to everyone. Stacey, you had mentioned being less than 1% in a space, pretty much, when we talk about minorities and being in this white space. And you have expressed that this is common, and it's common for our students as well. I want to ask, what advice do you give our students, whether 8 through 12 or even college students? What advice do you give our students regarding how to navigate being the only one in a space and trying to receive assistance?
Wow.
Put me on the spot.
No, I'm trying to put anybody on the spot. Anybody.
I don't know that there's one answer to that, but what I'm trying to do is create spaces on our campus where they have somebody to go to. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And a part of that for us, when we talk about, we've had conversations about recruitment and retention. And if we did recruit somebody that looked like me, or say they were just a person of color, the truth is, do we have the culture within our district that they will want to stay?
The belonging piece.
And so that is really what we have to work on as a district. I'm not saying anything other than we need to improve that. And create a space where people want to come to us. Yeah, we get some folks from the city, and sometimes that's because they're just tired of the city. Mm-hmm. But I want to get folks that come to us because they want to help change some things.
Absolutely.
And it does take special people to be able to do that and navigate that. And I can't be the only one talking to our students about how it is to, because I'm just one person across 11 schools in the district. You know what I'm saying? And so I think creating the African American Leadership Club and creating spaces like that within our district creates a safe space for our kids to just be.
Yeah.
To just be. They can say I be instead of I will be and be okay. You know what I'm saying? They can just be themselves. They can be the culture, the person that they are, and not have to code switch or do anything like that, because that becomes tiring.
Absolutely.
We know it. We know it. And so being able to try and create those spaces, and when we go out and recruit, we have to look at ourselves. I'm not really just selling my district. I really have to sell Paducah. Because if I'm trying to recruit a person of color, sometimes when they look at our district, it's going to be very hard to recruit them there. Mm-hmm. Give me a chance. You know, let's take some students to recruitment fairs. Let's have them talk about, hey, we need you. We need you for the kids that are coming behind us. Those are the conversations that we have to have. And, you know, when you're talking to students about, you know, trying to give them advice, you have to allow them to just tell their experience and not just say, I know I've been there. Just allow them to tell their experience and to know that they have a safe place. And if I don't have people of color that can be a safe place for them in that moment, if I'm not in the building or if there's no person of color in that building, I have to have an equity champion. Absolutely. That is a safe place for our black kids or our kids of color. And that's why it's very important that we do this work together in our district, because there's probably not going to be a me or a Shonda in my district that they may see that day. But there may be a Holly Miller that can be a safe place and that's fighting for black kids to make sure that they're on the same level as all of the other kids. And so that's what we have to create. I don't think that there's one answer that I give a black kid or one cookie cutter advice that I can give a black kid about being the only one. There's just not.
I'll take that. And I'll take all of what you said and we receive it to help us move forward. Frederick Douglass had said there's no struggle, there's no progress. Mm-hmm. I want to say thank you for being a part of the struggle in order for us to progress. Amen. So I want to acknowledge all of you for being here and being a part of this panel and making us aware, educating us about what it is that you do, what you do here in Paducah, how it's received, how it should be received. Thank you for being the equity champion. Thank you for being the leader. Thank you for exposing us to all of how you do what you do and falling on a knife that sometimes will feel more like a stab, but we can definitely appreciate the fact that you do it, because we know that that's not something that is easy to do when you are standing alone and trying to get other people to see you as well as see all of us when we cannot be present. So we want to thank you. As we wrap up, where do we go now? When it comes to Black History Month, where do we go now? We think about Black History Month and it being started in 1926. We think about it as Black History Week and then 1976. And when usually we think about Black History Month, we're always talking about what happened in the past, civil rights. We see the same pictures, black and white. We think about Miss Rosa Parks. We forget to talk about Claudette Colvin. Right. Mm-hmm. We think about Martin Luther King Jr., but we neglect to talk about those who have marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We forget to talk about where we're going as we move forward and setting the stage for our next generation and making them a part of the future of Black history. Mm-hmm. So when we think about Black history, we think about it as a past remembered, but a future promised, right? Absolutely. So I want to make sure that as we sit in this room, what are we going to do to make sure that Black History Month is not something that just stays in history? What will we do? So as we conclude today, I just want to say thank you once again for being here. We are going to segue to Mr. Jalen Harris, who is going to serenade us with some great Black history tunes, of which are going to move our soul. And so I just want to say once again, thank you for those who have attended. And we're then going to go into talking about the importance of Black Greek letter organizations in the history of Black Greek letter organizations, and we cannot start without having the ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha. So we will start first with Jalen. Thank you so much, and thank all of our panelists.